Hey everybody, here we are in Illustrator, and you can see that the setup for a new document looks pretty similar to all the other stuff that we've worked on. Your canvas or artboard, where your layout goes. This is where you're going to be drawing, sketching. You can do painting, you can do some layout here as well. Painting is better done in Photoshop, I think, if you're using your actual computer instead of an iPad. I think Fresco and Procreate are better than Illustrator for that kind of stuff as well. But today we're working in Illustrator, and I want to talk about and show you some tools. So if you see, we have the same kind of setup up the top. You have your almost like a command center, and then you have your toolbar on the left. And then over here you have other palettes that you can click on to see different things. You have a stroke, so that's the when you're drawing you'll use a stroke, and you can change the weight and how that stroke looks, whether it has rounded edges and corners. You have your swatches that you can work with, and you click on one or the other, the stroke or the fill, in order to use those within your artboard here. You can also just use this as a color picker. So let's go back to layers, and we're going to use just one layer for now. And we're going to go to create some shapes, and we're going to use the rectangle tool. And as you see, I'm holding down on the rectangle tool button, and it shows me all the other options that you can use. So I want you to play around with those, and I'm going to just choose the rectangle for now. And notice that I have a black stroke and a white fill, so that's going to give me exactly that. I'm going to come over here onto the artboard, and I'm just going to make a box of sorts. It's not perfect, but it's a box. And you can see, looks like it's a transparent background, but that's actually white fill. So I can also go over here and click on those little arrows, and that gives me, it switches the stroke with the fill. So I'm going to go back, but I want to actually change that color. So I'm just going to click on the fill box itself. It brings it forward. It also brings up the color picker. I'll pick this purple. Maybe I want to get rid of the stroke, so I just click on the stroke, and I'll click the none little button underneath and go back to my selection tool, and there we have a box with color. So I'm going to make some more, and I'm going to change the color. But look what I did. I had selected the stroke, so it made a red stroke, and that's wrong. So all I have to do is turn it off and then click on the fill box, go back to the color picker, and make some more color choices. There's the same. I can do it here. Again, I can go up and just keep changing my colors as much as I want, and so on. So now I want to show you how you can draw with the pen tool and what the pen tool does for you. So I'm going to select all these all at once. I'm just going to drag my selection tool, click on my desktop, and drag it all the way down. I'm just going to delete those, go to my pen tool, and again, right, see how it has the little arrow here to hold down? It shows you all the options that you have here for the pen tool, which a lot of these we'll be going over later. But for right now, the pen tool is specifically for creating shapes, you know, and you can draw too, but it's for creating objects, so that have a fill as well as could have a stroke if you want. So I'll show you what I mean by an object. So when you're creating lines, you're only going to be creating, say, like a line drawing. If I'm creating an object, I'm going to use my pen tool so that I can close my line drawing, right? So I'm going to start here. I click on the artboard, the desktop, whatever you want to call it, and I lift up now, and you can see that Illustrator is pushing me, or it's at least showing me the direction of where the next part of my line is going to go. So I'm going to click and hold it down on the desktop. I'm not just going to click and let up. So I click down and hold, and then I'm going to pull it. I'm going to pull the mouse as it's down, my Wacom stylus, and I'm pulling. You can see I'm making an arc. So I have two anchor points. Those are those little white squares that are sort of blank. And then I have what I'm pulling on are these little arms that are telling me which way the arc of my line is going to go. Now also remember, when I let go now, you're going to see part of a fill. And that can be distracting, so normally I like to only have over here on the left, I like to have the stroke selected. So I'm going to click on the stroke. I'm going to click on that same color, and I'll click back on my fill, and I'm going to click none. And now you can see it's very faint because it's underneath the little hairline that's guiding me, but it is that turquoise blue. So I'm just going to make drop another anchor point. But you also see when I lift it up, Illustrator is pushing me into that similar arc, right off of that guideline there. And it shows me all sorts of other guides. So it can, you can do many things, and it tries to help you, but sometimes that help is in the way of what you really want to do. So I'm just going to click down. I've dropped another anchor, and I'm pulling. You can see those little arms. I also call them handlebars. They're coming out and they're changing the arc. So you have a lot of control there, sort of. Right now it seems like you don't, but let's get to that in a minute. So I'm making my arc a little bit different, and then I'm going to close it. Now, closing this object, or these lines here, is going to create an object that I can fill. Now, once I get back to the original anchor, you can see that little anchor gets bigger, and it even tells you it's an anchor. But also notice that there's that little tiny circle below the nib of my pen, right? If I pull away, you don't see it. When I hover over top of that first anchor, it shows you that tells you you're closing the object. It's becoming an object now. So when I click onto that anchor, I'm not going to just let up immediately. I'm going to click and hold, and now I can also change the arc of that part of the line. But I do have an actual object, so I can fill it completely. And I'll go over back to my tool bar, and I see that I have my fill box up front, and I'm going to click on that color, and I have a filled object. And you can see that it is an object. If I wanted to make lines, and I click, oops, interesting. I want to go and get rid of the fill, but I'm going to go back to the pen. I'm just going to create lines, right? So I drop down my first anchor, I put down my second anchor, but I'm not letting up right away. I'm holding it down, and then I'm going to pull, and Illustrator pushes me into that next arc. Maybe I want that, maybe I don't, but I'm going to drop it down. So it's the same sort of plane, right? Now, if I drop down another anchor and I just lift up, I've made a straight line. So that's the beauty of holding down, keeping the mouse or your stylus down on, your Wacom tablet or on wherever your hard surface is that you're pushing the mouse. I'm holding it down on the anchor, and I'm pulling those little handlebars to make an arc. And then I can come over here and I can fill it. Go back up to the selection tool, and we're done. If I want to, let's see, I want to make actual lines, I'm going to go to my pencil tool, which is underneath the shaper tool. So the pencil tool is really a lot more for regular drawing. And again, these are just line drawings. You can use that and the paintbrush to make lines. But for our purposes, we're just going to use the pencil right now. And I'm going to make lines. And this is where I can go over to my stroke on this other palette here, and I can make the stroke 4 points, 60 points, 100 points, as many as you want, and you'll see that the line thickens up. And I'm going to make it bigger, 16 points. I'm going to make it 60 points. You also see that as I make it larger, the actual shape of it distorts because it can't make these curves very easily. If I want this to be a rounded edge or more of a rounded curve, I can go over here, push these little buttons, and I have a different effect. So I'm going to bring down the stroke a little bit, and you see it does change the shape a little bit. If we go back over here for the lines themselves, right? Not the object so much yet, but the lines. I'm going to click on it with the direct selection tool, which is underneath your selection tool. And zooming in, you can see that some of these anchor points, actually all the anchor points, and you can see these are little handlebars, the little arms that are that you're going to be able to manipulate the arc with, the little white anchor points are active, and I can click on those and drag them to change the shape of the line that I've just drawn. Pretty good. And you can see some of these anchor points that are still here. They're little tiny ones, but I can pull on them and I can change the arc. If I click on an actual anchor, those handlebars appear and I can manipulate the shape of the arc. See, so I'm now going to click on this little anchor, the handlebars appear. Click on this anchor, the handlebars appear. So something else you can do with the pen tool as well as your direct selection tool. So you can do similar things that like I just did with the lines here with these anchor points. So I can change sort of the shape of my object, but it's pretty limited. I can use the handlebars to change that up a little bit. But what I really want to do is I want to make these kind of curves like I did in the lines. So what I need to do is go back under the pen tool, click on it and hold it down, and I'm going to add anchor points to my object. And as long as my object is selected, and you can see that because the anchor points and the handlebars and the sort of little tiny blue hairline is around the object, now I can click right on that object on the line and add more anchor points. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my direct selection tool, and I click off of it so it turns it off, and I click back on the line with the direct selection tool, and you see my little anchor points are now active, and I have more options to change the shape altogether. And I can click back on the handlebars. So I do have more opportunity to make changes the more points I add more anchor points I add to my object. So play around with those a little bit. Have some fun, make some cool things. Just get used to the idea of what you can do with the pen tool. And with the pencil tool, remember that's underneath the shaper tool, so just click down and hold onto it and scroll down to the pencil tool, and you can make as many sort of lines, cross hatching, this type of stuff comes into effect, and you can change the opacity, you can change the style of the pencil that you're using, as well as change the weight of the stroke, and then the end caps, and then any curves that might happen, and just play around with that and have some fun.